March 1403. In a Greek village in the middle of the Thracian plains, an 8-year-old boy is forced to release his mother's hand. The janissary is holding him by the arm. The mother says nothing. The boy says nothing. They only look. The final glance is not long. The pulls. The boy turns away. The mother's hand remains empty. At the door, 12 more children stand, all between ages 7 and 14. Their hands are not bound. There's no need for them to flee. Where would they go? The village elder stands beside them. Names are written in the ledger. Ottoman script. The children cannot read. The families cannot read. But the elder reads. Each time a name is called, a mother steps forward. A child is handed over. Silently. No one cries. Crying counts as rebellion. The janissary completes the records. 12 names, 12 bodies. The Sultan's right. This is what Devshirme means. The children are lined up. As they leave the village square, a woman forms a sentence. Will he come back? The does not answer, because the answer is already known. No, he will not return, but he will not die either. He will become someone else. Devshirme was not a soldier recruitment system. Devshirme was an identity erasure factory. From the 1380s to the 1700s, exactly 320 years, the Ottoman Empire's child collection mechanism operated. Every 3 to 5 years, officials were sent to the Balkans, to Anatolia's Christian villages, to the Caucasus. Their task was simple: identify suitable aged, healthy, intelligent-looking male children. Notify the families, take delivery, record, transport. The system was not random, it was systematic. First, the village priest or elder would be summoned. The Devshirme order would be read to him. It was the Sultan's decree. It could not be refused. The priest would gather the villagers, inform the families. The families had 3 options: hand over their children, hide their children, and the village would be punished. Flee, but there was nowhere to flee. Most would surrender, because Devshirme was considered the Sultan's grace. A peasant family's child would be taken into palace service, educated, rise, perhaps become a vizier. This was the official language. This was propaganda. But the truth was something else. The truth was this: a family would never see their child again. The child would forget their language, forget their name, forget their mother's face, and they had to forget, because only then would the system work. After the children were collected, the first stop was Istanbul. But before reaching Istanbul, something happened: circumcision. Most of the children came from Christian families. They had not been circumcised. On the road, in a caravanserai courtyard or military camp, mass circumcision would be performed. A hasty ceremony. A few imams. A surgeon. Children would be called in turn, the procedure performed, wounds bandaged, left to one side. This was the first physical intervention, the first bodily mark. It told the child, "You are now part of something else." There was pain, there was blood, but there was no sound. Screaming was forbidden. A male child did not cry. A body destined to become a janissary did not feel pain. After circumcision, the journey would continue. For weeks, sometimes months, the children would walk, grow tired, fall, rise, walk again. No one would say anything, because there was no common language anymore. The Albanian boy did not know Greek. The Greek boy did not know Bulgarian. The Bulgarian boy did not know Bosnian. And all would learn Turkish, but not yet. They would not speak anything yet. Before the children reached Istanbul, weeks would pass. The journey was not a route. The journey was a process. Every day the same. Walking, rest, walking, night camp, morning walking again. There was no conversation, because there was no common language. The Albanian boy did not know Bulgarian. The Bulgarian boy did not know Greek. The Greek boy did not know Bosnian. And all walked together silently. The janissary walked ahead. Behind him, 12 bodies, 12 pairs of feet, 12 pairs of eyes looking at the ground. Sometimes one would fall. The ayah would stop. Wait. The child would rise, walk again. No one helped, because helping was forbidden. Everyone had to learn to stand on their own feet. The first week was the hardest. The children still remembered their villages, remembered their mothers' voices, remembered the smell of their homes, but remembering caused pain. And the only way to suppress the pain was to walk. Just walk, without thinking about anything, just putting one foot in front of the other. The second week, memories began to blur. His mother's face lost clarity. His house's window disappeared from his mind's eye. The village's name melted on his lips. The third week, only exhaustion remained. No strength left to think, no energy left to remember. Only the next step existed, the next rest, the next night. And as Istanbul approached, the world left behind grew distant. When they arrived in Istanbul, the first task was name change. One room, one scribe, one ledger. The scribe would call each child. "What is your name?" he would ask. The child would answer. The scribe would not write it. The scribe would write a different name. Turkish, Muslim, new. From now on, your name is Mehmed. Your name is Hassan. Your name is Suleiman. The old name would not enter the ledger. Only where he came from would be written. From a Greek village, from Albanian province, from the Bosnian border. But the name would be lost. When the name was lost, the past was lost too. The name he heard in his mother's voice no longer served any purpose, because he would not speak with his mother, would not speak with his siblings, would never return to that village. Then the conversion ceremony would be performed. A simple ceremony. An imam. The shahada. The child's repetition. He had become Muslim. But did the child understand this? No. The child was only repeating, because he had to repeat. This was a step in the system, not a spiritual transformation, a registration procedure. "You are now Muslim," was said. The child accepted. There was no other option. After Istanbul, the children were divided into two groups. First group, the intelligent, handsome-faced, aristocratic-mannered ones. These were taken to the palace. To the Enderun. Here they would become viziers, pashas, scribes. They would receive education. It would take years, but eventually they would be at the empire's peak. Second group, the rest. These were sent to Anatolia, given to Turkish families. They would work on farms, 7 to 10 years, learn Turkish, grow with land, animals, silence, then be called to the janissary corps. Records say the second group's numbers were much larger, so most children did not go to the palace. Most ended up in an Anatolian village, in a Turkish family's home, and worked there like laborers. They were not guests, not entrusted. They were labor, free. The family taught them Turkish, but not with affection, with commands. Bring this, carry that. Be quiet, listen, the child learned, because he had to learn to survive. The first year he did not speak, only watched, forgot his own language, forgot his mother's voice, forgot his siblings' names. When he tried to remember, a blur would come, an emptiness. Then the emptiness would grow, and one day it would disappear completely. Memory erasure was not intentional. Memory erasure was inevitable, because the world the child lived in no longer spoke any common language with his past. For children sent to Anatolia, the process was longer. They would take to the roads again after Istanbul, to Bursa, to Konya, to Ankara, to Karaman, distributed to Turkish families. A family would take one child, sometimes two, never three. When the child arrived at the house, the family would show him a place. Barn, storage, kitchen. "This is your place," would be said. The child would sit. The family spoke Turkish. The child did not understand, but he listened. The first month he spoke not a single word, only watched, did whatever the family said. When told, "Bring water," he brought water. When told, "Carry hay," he carried hay. When told, "Be quiet," he was quiet. And in silence, he learned language. Turkish was learned not through coercion, but through survival. If the command was not understood, he was beaten. If the command was not done, food was withheld. If the command was correctly understood, no sound was made. The child learned. By the second year, he was forming sentences, but forgetting his own language. By the third year, he was thinking in Turkish. By the fifth year, when he tried to remember his mother's name, a blur would come, an emptiness. He wanted to remember but could not. And because he could not remember, he felt guilt. By the seventh year, even guilt disappeared, because there was nothing left to remember. Only life here existed. Only language here existed. Only duties here existed. And when called to the Janissary Corps 10 years later, that child was no longer Greek, not Albanian, not Bulgarian. He was now the Sultan's servant. 7 to 10 years later, the children, now young men, were called to the Janissary Corps. Here, the second training began. Military training, physical endurance, weapon use, discipline, obedience, silence. But the real training was something else. Loyalty transfer. The Janissary Corps created a family, but there was no blood bond. There was corps bond. There was soldier brother. There was commander father. There was Sultan God. The old family was forgotten. The new family was the Corps. Janissaries could not marry, could not have children, could not own property. Everything belonged to the Corps. Life belonged to the Corps. Death too. And the system said this: the only person dying for you is the Sultan. The only person you must die for is the Sultan. But did they accept this? Most accepted. Because there was no alternative, no village to return to, no language to remember, no mother to embrace. Behind was only emptiness, and the emptiness was filled by the Corps. The Janissary Corps was a military barracks, but not only a military barracks. The Janissary Corps was an identity production center. Everyone who entered here went through the same process: hair shaving, uniform dressing, Corps oath, Bektashi rituals, and most importantly, Corps brotherhood. No more blood brother, Corps brother existed. No more father figure, commander existed. No more family, Corps existed. The system did this consciously because the system knew this. A human must attach. If not attached, collapses. So cutting old bonds was not enough. New bonds had to be produced, and the Janissary Corps did this perfectly. A newly arrived youth felt alone the first day, felt lost the second day, felt helpless the third day. The fourth day, an elder brother would come to him. "Come, let me help you," he would say. The fifth day they ate together. The sixth day they stood guard together. The seventh day they became brothers. And this brotherhood was stronger than blood, because this brotherhood was not chosen, but it was built. And once built, it did not dissolve. When Janissaries were sent to war, their families were not with them, but their Corps brothers were with them. And dying for a Corps brother was easier than dying for one's father, because the Corps brother said this: "I am here like you. I am alone like you. I belong to this Corps like you." This commonality produced power, and power kept the Ottoman army standing for centuries. But what was the source of power? Not loyalty, loneliness, non-belonging, the state of being unable to belong anywhere else. In the 1450s, a janissary was assigned to raid a Greek village. The village was in Thrace, a tax collection operation by the Sultan's order. But the village was resisting. The janissaries entered. Houses were set on fire. A woman was running in the street. The janissary caught her. The woman looked at him. Did she recognize him? The records do not say this, but there was something in the woman's gaze, a recognition, a hope, perhaps a scream. "Aren't you my son?" The janissary said nothing, released the woman, walked forward, moved to another house. Did he recognize her? Perhaps. But even if he recognized her, would it matter? No. because he was no longer her son. He was now the Sultan's servant. The Devshirme system did not only produce soldiers. The Devshirme system produced loyalty. As the Ottoman Empire grew, it faced a problem. Turkish aristocratic families were gaining power. Landowners were becoming independent. Beys could rival the Sultan. This was dangerous. What was the solution? Create a rootless elite class. Devshirme children were the perfect solution because they had no roots, they had no families, they had no past. They owed only the Sultan, who raised them, the Sultan, who fed them, the Sultan, who empowered them, the Sultan. So Devshirme children were brought to the highest offices. Most grand viziers were Devshirme. Most pashas were Devshirme. Most beylerbey were Devshirme. And they all knew this. If they betrayed the Sultan, they had nothing to lose, because they had nothing anyway. The system was horrifying, but the system worked. In the 1600s, the system began to crack. Janissaries began to marry, began to have children, began to own property. They were no longer rootless, but they were still powerful. And a rooted military class with power was dangerous. In 1622, Janissaries killed Sultan Osman II because the Sultan wanted to close the core. The Janissaries did not allow it. They captured the Sultan and strangled him in Yedikule. The empire was shocked, but the Janissaries did not care, because they too were now a family. Even without blood bonds, there were interest bonds, and interest was stronger than blood. The Devshirme system still operated, but it no longer served its original purpose. In the 1700s, the system slowed. When the Devshirme system began to break down in the 1700s, the first sign was this. Janissaries began to marry, began to have children, began to own property. They no longer belonged only to the core. They belonged to something else too. And this was the beginning of the system's collapse. Because the system had anticipated this. If a person owns something, they fear losing it. A fearful person obeys but can also rebel. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II completely closed the Janissary Corps. Vaka-i Hayriye, the auspicious event, it was called. Thousands of Janissaries were killed. The corps was set on fire. The Devshirme system officially ended. But what ended was not just the system. What ended was an identity erasure architecture. For 320 years, hundreds of thousands of children were collected, separated from their families. Names changed, languages forgotten, religions changed, and placed into a new identity. History calls this social mobility. History praises this as imperial intelligence. History shows this as the source of Ottoman power. But the records say something else. The records speak of the silence left in village squares. The records speak of mothers' empty hands. The records speak of children's final glances. When the corps was closed in 1826, the Janissaries resisted, but they could not win, because they were no longer just a military force. They were now a social class. They had families, they had children, they had things to lose, and they lost. Thousands were killed. The corps was burned. The system ended. But something remained. Emptiness. The emptiness left by the children taken through Devshirme, and the emptiness never filled. The 8-year-old child handed over in that Thracian village in 1403 became a Janissary commander in Istanbul 15 years later. His name was now Mehmed. It was known he came from a Greek village, but which village was not known. The records only said Thracian province. Mehmed did not marry, did not have children, served for 40 years. When he died, his grave was inscribed Janissary Mehmed, faithful servant of the Sultan. His mother's name was not written anywhere, because his mother no longer mattered. Mehmed's past began the moment he arrived in Istanbul. He had forgotten the rest, or had he pretended to forget? We do not know this. Perhaps it did not matter. Perhaps forgetting was easier than remembering. Perhaps the system wanted this anyway, to make forgetting easier. Devshirme was not an exception. Devshirme became a model. Throughout history, empires used the same logic. Empower rootless elites, feed familyless armies, govern pastless bureaucracy. The Mamluk Sultanate was ruled by slave soldiers. China's eunuch palace servants were selected with the same logic. In Sparta, children were taken from families at age 7 and sent to military camps. Devshirme was not unique. Devshirme was just the longest operating version. 320 years, hundreds of thousands of children, thousands of villages, silent surrenders. A mother extends her hand to emptiness. A child turns and walks away. Both will never see each other again, but both will survive. The mother will raise another child in place of the lost one. The child will find another belonging in place of the lost mother. Both will continue living, but both will have lost something. What they lost was not connection. What they lost was language. What they lost was the right to remember. In the records, this sentence appears: Devshirme children were grateful to the Sultan because he saved them from peasantry. This was official propaganda. But some records say something else. In the 1550s, a Devshirme wrote a letter in old age. He never sent the letter. It was found among his notebooks. In the letter was this line: I cannot remember my mother's face, but sometimes I hear her voice. In my dreams, she says something, but I do not understand, because I have forgotten her language. This letter remained in the archive. No one published it, because the system did not make room for such stories. The system only made room for success stories, for children who became viziers, for youths who became pashas, for soldiers who remained loyal to the Sultan, but there was no room for children who heard their mother's voice in dreams, but could no longer understand, because they were the face the system did not want to see. When Devshirme ended, what remained? Thousands of graves, bodies with Turkish names but Greek, Albanian, Bulgarian, Bosnian origins, thousands of records, ledgers recording how many children were taken from which village, thousands of voids, family trees never filled again. And a question: were all these children truly fortunate? History says yes. The records do not say no. The records only remain silent, and silence is sometimes the clearest answer. When the auspicious event occurred in 1826, the janissaries were burned. But one thing did not burn: memory. The void created by the Devshirme system did not fill even centuries later. In some Balkan villages, this saying is still told: when the Ottomans came, children were hidden. This is not hate speech. This is remembering. Remembering that families who refused to give their children were punished. Remembering that the entire village was held responsible. Remembering there was nowhere to flee. And most painfully, remembering that children never returned. History dismisses this as old-era pain. But in the villages, this pain was not dismissed. In the villages, this pain was carried from generation to generation, without naming it, only feeling it. The Devshirme system ended in 1826, but what the system created did not end. What the system created was this: demonstrating that it was possible to tear a child from their family, make them forget their language, change their name, erase their past, and call this grace. This architecture collapsed, but the idea remained. And ideas stand longer than stone. When that 8-year-old child released his mother's hand, what did he feel? We do not know this. The records did not write this, but we know one thing: that hand was never held again. That name was never spoken again. That language was never spoken again. And the system repeated this for 320 years, because the system learned this: the surest way to keep an empire standing is not to feed a loyal army. It is to build a loyalty so rootless that it cannot remember anything else. This was Devshirme, not a child collection system, a memory erasure architecture.